Good morning, everybody. Here we are. We have this great opportunity to get our day kicked off right. I'm going to turn this light off here, casting a little bit. There we go. That's more better. Hey, we have this great opportunity get our day kicked off right. Another dose of God's Word, which is the best medicine that we can have to get our day off on the right foot. Hey, this morning I want to look at a passage, a statement that Jesus made over in Mark the 4th chapter. He's what he's going to be talking about here is how we hear. When we hear the gospel, when we hear God's word being taught, or as we're reading, how are we hearing it? How are we receiving it? How are we processing that word? Jesus makes this statement for us to think about. Mark chapter 4, verses 24 and 25. Jesus said, Then he said to them, Take heed what you hear. With the same measure you use, it will be measured to you, and to you who hear, more will be given. For whoever has, to him more will be given. But whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken away from him. Many times we can look at that and think about your blessings and things like that. But if you really just kind of slow down and think about what Jesus is saying here, let's notice this. Verse 24, take heed what you hear. That's what he's talking about. Take heed what you hear. So many times, just anything in life, we hear something on the radio or on TV or, maybe in a conversation or what have you. So many times we hear what we want to hear. And we dismiss things that we think is just really irrelevant, or maybe we weren't paying all that much attention, or whatnot. I'll give you an example. In Matthew the 16th chapter, Jesus was talking about how he was going to be betrayed and crucified and killed, but then he'd be risen again. But that's not what Peter heard. Peter heard that he was going to die, and he said, "No, Lord, that's not going to happen." Jesus said, Get behind me, Satan, you've got your mind on things of men and not on the things of God. So that's kind of that. I believe that's kind of the point of what Jesus is making here. Sometimes we hear what we want to hear. To what level, to what depth, to what clarity are we hearing what is said in God's word? So he says, take heed. That means pay attention to what I'm hearing. With the same measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Now, all right, so think about what Jesus is saying here. If I listen to God's word with a very superficial attention to it, I'm not going to get much out of it. Or, sometimes if we hear God's word with our mind already made up, we're not going to get much out of it. So, we can never, Jesus said, the aspect, the depth of how I hear God's word is going to depend on how much knowledge and understanding I get back. If all you're getting is a very superficial teaching or reading or exposure to the word, you're not going to get much understanding. It'll be a very thin layer, superficial layer of what God is trying to teach us. But if we are really attentive and we are really listening to the things contained in God's word, then we are indeed going to get some understanding. And sadly, so much in the religious world is that very superficial, very simple, it's kind of rehashed, reworn type of teaching. And so when the real meat comes, it's automatically dismissed. There's no way that could possibly be right, because this preacher, this pastor, or I've studied this, or I've got this degree, or what have you. So what I've come to understand, well, that's the truth. Maybe, maybe not. I think that's what Jesus is saying. Again, he's talking to the religious people of his word. He says, we need to be very careful are we hearing what we want to hear? I mean, a lot of times we do that. It's just in all aspects in life. Just look at the political arena. You've got people that think one news news outlet is garbage, and another news outlet is absolutely, that's the cream of the crop. That's absolute truth, whatever they say. And then you get somebody else, and it's just the other way around. So we hear, it's just in everyday life. We hear what we want to hear. And how much more important is it when we talk about God's Word? Do we hear what we want to hear and dismiss what we don't? It's all truth, and it all has to fit together. But Jesus is saying we need to take heed, because if you're not listening honestly, openly, humbly, respectfully, reverently, we're not going to get much back out of God's Word. We're going to be stuck with the same understanding that we have. And to you who hear, more will be given. More what? More understanding. The more and the deeply and openly that we study and listen to God's Word, we're going to come to realize, hey, you know what? I'm wrong on this. I'm off on this. I need to adjust this. I need to fix it. I think that's the idea of what Jesus is saying. It's to you who hear, that's honest with God's Word. Maybe we hear something that just don't quite set right. Instead of just automatically dismissing whatever that it might be, maybe take some time and go back and study it. And oftentimes, sometimes we study just to prove ourselves right, not necessarily to learn something new or to bring something into more clarity, but oftentimes we all are guilty of studying just to prove ourselves right. In other words, to reconfirm what I already believe. Well, then I'm not listening to what God's Word has to say. That's what Jesus is saying. Verse 25, for whoever has, to him more will be given. Whoever has what? Who has the right attitude, the right heart, the right reception of hearing what God is saying in His Word. But whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken away from him. So even if I don't have knowledge, what little bit that I might, if I have the wrong attitude, the wrong approach to God's Word, I'm going to lose that, which really haven't lost anything because I haven't come to a knowledge and an understanding of the truth. What a very simple, just 2 verses, but yet what a profound point. Let us not have this superficial hearing and listening of God's Word. And let us not have the attitude is that what I believe is absolute rock solid truth, regardless of what anything else that may be brought before me. Jesus battled with these religious leaders of his day, and they were flat out wrong. Sometimes we can be in that group where we just dismiss, a passage, a reasoning, on something and just absolutely dismiss. Well, now we've fallen into that same category of what Jesus said. I'm not listening. I'm not hearing. So I'm never going to be able to grow into an accurate, into a correct knowledge and understanding of God's Word. So, as Jesus said, take heed what you hear. Take heed what you hear. I'm going to leave you with that. There's your dose of God's Word today. I hope it'll do you some good. And I hope and I pray that we won't be those kind of people that's just got that superficial hearing. But we will hear honestly and clearly, humbly, so that we can come to a knowledge of an understanding of the truth. Because ain't none of us got it all figured out. Ain't none of us got. So iron sharpens iron. And there are times that, we may hear something that just does not, coincide with what I believe to be true. We ought not dismiss that as automatically wrong just because I don't believe it, or just my preacher don't believe that, or my pastor don't. But let us get back in God's Word and study it and examine it and listen to the reasoning of why something would be right or why something would be wrong. So many times we say, well, I'm not perfect. But so many times our attitude towards God's Word, and maybe what we hear, is just the opposite. I am perfect. I'm not wrong. I can't possibly be wrong. All of that's wrapped up in what Jesus is saying here. Hey, Hey, get into God's Word this day. Study it, meditate upon it, ask Him for understanding, and let us have a right attitude and a right heart. Hey, Lord willing, tomorrow we'll get back. We'll get us another dose of God's Word. Get our day kicked off right. And until then, I hope you have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.